RFK Jr. campaign is not an independent campaign. It is not a grassroots campaign. It is a campaign increasingly guided by big money and big donors, including big ultra-Zionist donors. I believe that one of them is Miriam Adelson, the wife of the late Sheldon Adelson, who was the key broker of Donald Trump's ultra-Zionist policy, as well as the Abraham Accords, was a longtime donor who helped basically fund Netanyahu's political career and who publicly called for dropping a nuclear weapon on Iran. Bobby Kennedy later this month will be doing a public event alongside Miriam Adelson and Shmuley Boteach, the reality show pseudo rabbi and dildo salesman, who is spending much of his time harassing adolescents at ice skating rinks in the New York area. I want to say it's shocking, but it just shows a complete lack of dignity and honesty by Bobby Kennedy Jr. to come out and present himself as a champion of free speech and opponent of the war state, and to surrender to these forces and allow them to completely engulf his campaign, which is dead as an independent force. Yeah, it's and there's another factor here. Tulsi Gabbard. It's expected that she will sign on as his vice president. Here's someone who actually started out as a kind of right-wing Democrat who received an award from Sheldon and Miriam Adelson. Just look up photos of her and the Adelsons. She was hanging out with them freely. And Shmuley. Shmuley was a good friend of hers early on. She then started to move into a more interesting place where she was challenging the U.S. proxy war on Syria. She was the lone voice in Congress doing this. She was on the debate stage with the Democrats calling out the warmongers. And now, after being spit out of the Democratic Party and then welcomed into a wing of the Republican Party with open arms, she's come full circle. And it appears that she's coming back to the place where that the seat at the table that the Adelson family in the Israel lobby has reserved for her. And she's a complete stooge and a shill for Israel, which means she's like a stooge for the deep state at this point. And these people just need to be treated with total contempt.
These are the people you're referring to, correct? This event here, the World Values Network presents Choosing Life Amid the Loss of a Parent and Child. Okay, Ricardo Luke, RFK Jr., Miriam Adelson, and Rabbi Shmuley.
Yeah, I mean, and Rabbi Shmuley, I mean, just his public behavior is just a total lack of dignity. He's just an insane public harasser. He's out in Times Square like a vagrant, screaming at the guys who hand out discount drink cards to strip clubs because they're not supporting him on Israel. And this is the guy that RFK Kennedy chooses to associate himself with because he's a channel for Adelson money, in my view. So who is the independent candidate right now who is on the ballot in enough states to actually make Biden pay a price for this genocide that the U.S. is a direct participant in? Who is it? It's not Cornel West because he's not on the ballot. And I think he's only on the ballot in one state because he left the Green Party. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to be on the ballot in enough states. He gave a great speech in Dearborn, by the way, which is where independent candidates should be. They should be breaking into Michigan, which is where they can threaten Biden the most because of the strength of the Arab diaspora there. But I don't even know if he's on the ballot there. But the Green Party is on the ballot, going to be on the ballot in like 20 states where 75% of the votes will be. And Jill Stein is someone who supports the BDS movement, who is fully on board with the Palestine Solidarity Movement and with putting Netanyahu and the Israeli government before the ICC. So people need to eventually, if you decide that the Biden and Democrats need to be taught a lesson for what they're doing here and that they can't count on your vote while committing genocide. If you're taking the no genocide pledge, then everyone's going to have to eventually cohere around one independent candidate who's on the ballot. And that may not be, maybe if you prefer Cornel West, it may not be the person that you initially preferred, but I think Cornel West is going to have to make that decision too. It's early yet, but I think it's time to get strategic.
Yeah, I think that Jill, another thing too, in 2016, Jill was actually on the ballot in over 40 states. She'll probably get there again. She actually just announced that she's on the ballot in Arizona, which is going to be huge this time around, because the Green Party was not on the ballot in Arizona in 2020. And remember, Joe Biden actually won a significant amount of independent voters in Arizona in 2020. So the fact that the Green Party is now on the ballot in Arizona this time around, that could be a potential game changer. But all the things that you just said about RFK Jr., why do you feel like some people still just don't see it? I feel like some people are looking for a hero. I mean, I pointed out the fact that RFK Jr. released this video where he was acknowledging the Armenian genocide. And I'm just like, the gall of this guy, you're willing to acknowledge that, but you're not willing to acknowledge what's happening to the Palestinian people. I think he really does know the truth. I think he has been persuaded not to go there, not to press up against the Israeli lobby. That's just my opinion. But it's very in your face. Some of the same people that said they had an issue with big money, now all of a sudden they have no issue with big money because RFK Jr. is taking it. I just don't understand. I feel like people just want a hero. And I feel like some people have fallen in love with the idea of RFK Jr. as a president, and that's what they're hanging on.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people for whom the Israel-Palestine issue is not as important as, for example, what happened during COVID, which was really traumatic for a lot of people. And he was brave on that issue, whereas the other independent candidates were not. We didn't hear much from Jill Stein about that. Cornel West was doing like pro-Fauci propaganda. So for a lot of people, that is the big issue that compels them to support him. Other people are compelled by him being a Kennedy, and they hearken back to the days when the Democrats supported a major industrial base inside the U.S. and were skeptical of the war state and supported civil rights. And he wants to channel that tradition, and they get nostalgic. A lot of the people who are in the JFK assassination conspiracy movement, and I'm not saying the word conspiracy to dismiss them. I think their research is extremely important and legitimate. They think RFK will bring out the files, which every U.S. president has buried. So everyone has their reason for wanting to be around him. But my point is that when you submit yourself to the power of the Israel lobby, and not just the mainstream Israel lobby, but the extreme right-wing, pro-settler wing of the lobby that Adelson represents and Shmuley represents, you take a poison pill that will eventually destroy the entire body of your politics and everything you represent until nothing's left anymore except what they control. And that's what he's done. And I'm told different things. I see him on stage with Adelson, so it looks like there's a payoff. I'm told by people who know him, who are close to him, that he truly believes this stuff about Israel, although it looks like he was handed a script, but that in person, he delivers the script. Like in private, when he's supposed to be candid, he won't break from it. Some people speculate that it's about Epstein. I'm not really buying that, because he's been very out front about his sexual peccadillos and his former sex addiction. Like, I don't know what else could possibly come out that could damage him, or that anyone would actually care. So at this point, one thing is clear. What could have been a really threatening campaign to both Donald Trump and Joe Biden has been destroyed from within, because Bobby Kennedy Jr. is completely cut off from the independent podcast world that we represent, or the independent journalism world, as well as the pulsing heart of the activist community in the U.S., which is willing to go to war for you if you actually represent something. And so they're out. All those thousands and thousands of people who are out in the streets for Palestine now, they're politically homeless, or should I say politically unhoused. And they need to determine where their home will be pretty soon and not stay. I don't like, I hate saying it, like I sound corny, because like the 2020 propaganda was vote, vote, vote. And like you saw these liberals wearing like vote on their sunglasses and vote masks, like 3 vote masks. And like the other mask was like, you know, a Ukraine flag. But you should be prepared to vote against genocide and make Biden pay for this.
That's right. And it's interesting you brought up JFK, because I interviewed Rick Sterling recently. He wrote an article through Mint Press about the truth about JFK and where he stood on this issue with Israel. And JFK has a completely different position about Israel when you compare it to what RFK Jr. believes.
Or senior.
Or senior, exactly. Like they did not, and this is something when RFK has interviews, he's leaving this out. JFK did not agree with the fact of Israel having nuclear weapons. In fact, he questioned it multiple times, and he wanted to visit there before, you know what, he was assassinated. Could be connected, I don't know. But he did not agree with that. He did not agree with the direction that Zionism was moving in, because he thought it would create problems like what we have right now. So he was not in the same camp with RFK Jr., but RFK Jr. is doing all these interviews and he's leaving that part out.
Exactly. And he's really channeling the tradition of Teddy Kennedy, his uncle, who ran against Carter from the Likudnik right and condemned Jimmy Carter for opposing Israeli settlement activity. That was one of his key talking points. And Teddy Kennedy, he was trying to get pro-Israel money. Pro-Israel money powered his campaign, and he was the ultimate progressive except for Palestine, the ultimate hypocrite, which is so common right now in the Democratic Party. I mean, he supported progressive social policies. He supported, he was a vehement opponent of Bush's war in Iraq and the torture program. And at the same time, he supported Ariel Sharon and Benjamin Netanyahu and every murderous Israeli prime minister to the hilt. And that's sort of something that Bobby Kennedy Jr. has taken on as well. But the hypocrisy just doesn't wash anymore, because the mask has been lifted on Israel. There is no liberal democratic Israel that anyone can point to. No one can say Israel just wants peace if the Palestinians would just let them. Israel's open about its intentions, its leadership, openly says they want Nakba 2.0, which means they acknowledge Nakba 1.0. They openly say it. They openly say they aim to kill Palestinian civilians, as many as possible. The Israeli president, Isaac Herzog from the Labor Party, said there are no civilians in Gaza. These are the statements that are in the South African filing before the International Court of Justice, and they really show you what Zionism is and what Israel is. And so the younger generation that doesn't watch legacy media and that often reads like primary documents like the South African filing, they are not going to go for this anymore. So Bobby Kennedy's left with a bunch, Junior is left with a bunch of kind of scattered, isolated boomer types who are lost in nostalgia. But the question is, where does everyone else go? And just another point about Bobby Kennedy is, like, he coasted a lot off of the platform he got from Tucker and from Fox News early on. But I think he poses the greatest threat to Donald Trump as an independent candidate. He poses a real threat to Trump because, I mean, he is going to peel off more votes from Trump than Biden. He would actually threaten Biden if he took a different position on Israel, but he threatens Trump. And you can see who he's cozying up with, especially if he has Tulsi Gabbard as his VP. That's a direct threat to Trump. So the Trumpist media is going to go after him at a certain point.
Right. I can see that happen as well. You mentioned Ted Kennedy. The other thing, too, is that Ted Kennedy killed a woman and got away with it. There's that, too.
Yeah. What's her name? Mary Jo Kopechny. at Chappaquiddick.
Yeah.
He was drunk. He drove off a bridge and into a river, and she drowned, and he managed to get out of the car. And I don't think he reported that he told the truth about her death. I mean, that's my recollection about it.
Yeah, he basically went back to the party. So the thing about Mary is that when the police came the next day, so he reported it, I think the next day, or someone else called it in the next day. What the police said is that if they would have been contacted the moment it happened, she would have actually lived, because they said when they found her in the car, her head was pushed upwards, which meant she was trying to breathe. So they said she actually didn't die from drowning. She died from suffocation because of the oxygen in the car. But anyway, he got away with it. He was not held accountable because he was a Kennedy.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not an totally isolated incident. There's a long history of the Kennedy family revealing or embodying the two-tiered system of justice in the U.S. Joseph P. Kennedy, I mean, look at his whole history as basically buying elections, bootlegging, and so on. But the only reason I would bring that up now, the only reason it's a fair critique of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is because he called Palestinians the most pampered people on the planet. He actually said that. So that's just disgusting.